Yo, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? Good to see you again, and today we have a video going over the top 8 decks from the tournament that I just hosted this past Monday. If you didn't see the video that I posted 2 days ago, that was basically a breakdown of all the matches that were live streamed for each round of the event. And we ended up having, I believe, 32 players, most of them consisting of my local community here in Virginia Beach. I wanted to invite them out to test this event for me so that I could see what my flaws and, weaknesses were, so I could try and be better for future events coming up. But yeah, I did have a few spots left open when I was, registering everybody. So I think I had 7 spots left open. So I just kind of threw the link out to everybody in the chat, and a few people were able to join up. And taking 8th place was one of those people. Sage, aka Kekfale, was able to take 8th place with this Boa Hancock list. And now going over this list, I was curious, how closely it related to the list that topped in Australia and ended up getting 4th place. And going over it and looking at the numbers, there's only basically a 1 card difference. So he decided to change one of the cards to something else, and we'll go over that shortly. But Boa performed really well in Australia, able to take 4th place, which is outstanding for a national championship. So obviously this deck does have some legs. Some cards that are worth noting are, we know the Kaya's in there for the 2K, but also just for cycling out some cards, being able to draw 2 trash 2 is always great. So this is a fantastic 2K to run. But I really do enjoy the 1-cost law kind of making a resurgence. It's very nice in this deck because there are a lot of cards that, you can potentially return cards to hand, or it has some form of requirement. And since it's such a cheap play, it's very easy to, use and then discard, or to bounce back to hand and play again, just so that you can get some of these cards' effects off. So I like to see that this card has been making a resurgence, especially in this deck. It's really awesome. We also have 4 of the Sengoku. Sengoku is just pretty much been a phenomenal card for a lot of blue decks as of late because of the massive introductions through the new starter deck with the 7 Warlords of the Sea package, that mostly Doflamingo's running. But this card does allow you to kind of search out those 7 Warlords type cards, being one of which Buggy, a staple 2K counter in this deck. Maybe not used as much of setting up the top of your deck, but, in the worst case scenarios, you can use it for that. But I think that if you do use it for that case, more than often, you're just trying to bounce the card back, using Law or using Jozu or something of the sort, just to get that card back into your hand and keep it as a 2K, which is a valuable asset. We do have the Doflamingo, which is really how this deck is trying to kind of set up its future plays, its draws, what it's going to be getting off of its leader effect. And you know what, that's maybe something I probably should have started with for those that aren't familiar with Boa Hancock's leader effect. Your turn, once per turn, the effect can be activated when a character is removed from the field by your effect. If you have 5 or less cards in your hand, you get to draw a card. So very solid with, what the cards that we're going to be touching on here very shortly that allow you to kind of bounce these back and recycle the idea. So Pudding, though, is a staple in every blue deck because why wouldn't you run this card? It's absolutely ridiculous. It's so good. It forces your opponent to play around it as well. Only running 2 copies is very interesting. Obviously, most Doflamingo lists are running about 3. But I think that they were just trying to find space, specifically for the cards in this deck. So it makes sense. And Crocodile at 4, 2K counter, but also being able to bounce back those 1-cost cards. 2 cost or less, but realistically in this deck, most of the 1-cost cards that you want to bounce back. and then potentially being able to use your leader effect off of that. Comboing very well with Jinbei as well. Just allowing you to go wide on turn 2 if possible is just fantastic. I mean, this card has solved a lot of Blue's issues with not being able to deal with board quickly enough. I think Jinbei is probably going to be a staple in many Blue decks to come. And we also have the Mihawk, which was ran at 2, more of a 2K counter than anything, but still a target for Jinbei to be played off of. And then having that draw 2, trash 2 effect can be really nice because this deck does have, you know, it does have some bricky cards in it. So just being able to have, you know, a bit of an answer for that is very nice. Law, one of the most annoying cards to deal with, and one of the cards that haunts my nightmares as a purple Luffy player. You know, ran as a 4-of to be able to return those low-cost cards, but also get rid of a 4-cost threat on your opponent's board. Totally makes sense. Jozu obviously being ran at 4 and Boa at 1. I did think that this was kind of interesting, but I understand that Boa might not be. It's more of a on curve kind of, you know, pause the game sort of card versus trying to build a little bit more tempo. It doesn't really solve the problem as much as it does kind of, you know, delay the problem. So I do understand this card at 1. I do think it's interesting though, just because I do think it's a powerful effect. But you know, this list was opting more for having that solution and being able to bounce back those cards that are going to be a little more tricky for you to deal with. And so this is where the first card difference from the top 4 list came into play. Doflamingo was ran at 1, whereas the top 4 list ran it at 2. And then Gravity Blade was being ran at 1, or excuse me, 2 here instead of the 1 that the top 4 player ended up having. So we do have Doflamingo and Borsalino. Doflamingo just being able to return a 7 cost or less to the owner's hand is very solid. This is actually a really great play into, you know, decks like Shanks and Purple Luffy as well. Just being able to bounce back some of those kind of annoying cards that you're like, oh god, I don't really have a great way to deal with this. So this is really solid. It's also just a 7k body on the board is fantastic. We also have the Borsalino being able to return, bottom deck a 4 cost, which is fantastic into the Doflamingo matchup. Great into Purple Luffy, getting rid of Shanks's, why am I forgetting the 4 cost card now? The Lucky Roo. Being able to get rid of that can be pretty problematic. Also, having a solution to the 4 cost Kuzan that gets played in Black Yellow Luffy, as well as sometimes Lucci, is very nice. Not putting Lucci in trash is always fantastic as well against a Lucci player. You know, bottom decking it and taking it out of their resource pool is amazing. So I love to see that this card, which was I was a huge fan of this card when Sakazuki was in play, doing pretty well. We also have Kaido at 10, Kaido at 3 of in the deck, the 10 cost that bounces an 8 and a 3 back to the owner's hand. Can also bounce your own cards back, which is really great, depending on if you needed something else to be returned, like a 2k counter, whether it was a Kaya, you know, a buggy, something of the sorts. You can get rid of an 8 cost on your opponent's turn and then bounce that back. So really enjoy that. And then 3 of the red rock to, you know, get rid of those really tall cards that nobody else has a solution for. So I like this deck. I think it's really cool to see Boa in the top 8 here. Congrats again to Sage for his placement. And then moving on to 7th place, we had Sam's list of the Marshall D Teach. I think this is very standard except for a couple of cards, so I'm not really going to go over, you know, pretty much everything in this because a lot of this stuff is very staple. Like we have the 2K Stronger, we've got the Lafitte Searcher, We've got the dock queue to be able to remove cards off the board with the reduction. We have 2 of the Vasco shots being played, just a very nice cheap blocker to kind of protect you in those times of need. We also have 3 of the Shiryu 2K counter being played. Again, searchable 2K counter with the Blackbeard Pirates type, very nice. Laboon with the reduction, fantastic card, absurdly overpriced right now. And then Jesus Burgess, so good. This card was put in some work on the live streams as well. We ended up seeing a Jesus Burgess get to a 12K in one of the matches. It was unbelievable. How do you deal with that? You don't. So unless you have Borsellino and you're playing Boa and you can just bottom deck a 4-cost, then you can. But that also relies on on-play effects, so never mind. Van Auger here, very good staple in the deck. Of course, running 4 of the Teach. And I believe this was 4 of the My Era Begins Blackbeard search event, if you will. So really nice to be able to fill up the trash. Now, this was the interesting card that was played as a 4 of in Sam's list here, the Tempest Kick Sky Slicer. Now, I personally have seen the mirror matchup for Marshall D. Teach, and it is awful. I don't know how anybody stomachs playing this deck simply because of the mirror matchup. The mirror is miserable. It is not fun. It is who can get the most 10-cost Teaches. And I thought this was a really interesting card because it serves 2 purposes in the deck, right? One, to be able to remove the stage that, your opponent might be running, whether they're playing, Marshall D. Teach, Blue-Purple Reiju. We've seen a couple of stages in some other lists, but not too many. But I do think that there is a world where the future of the game does have this kind of unused spot being the stage, and so not having too many cards that interact with that can be very annoying. But this card, allowing yourself to be able to remove opponent's stage of 3 or less, is very solid. But I think more oftenly used than the second effect is going to be KOing a character with a cost of 0. So pairing this with, your Laboon or your Van Auger to remove some pesky, cards off of the board. And, the trigger is fantastic as well, being able to draw 2 cards. It gives you, more hand size to be able to use for your effect, which is very crippling to your hand size as the game progresses. I think this is just a very interesting take on, how to play Blackbeard. And I personally was like, wow, 4 of Tempest Kick. Very interesting. Thought it was cool. Kind of wanted to point that out. We do have 4 of the Finger Pistol, as well as 2 of the Black Hole being played. So there obviously were some sacrifices to the list. Some numbers kind of worked here or there to make the Tempest Kick Sky Slicer a 4 of in the deck. So bringing this down to a 2 and then having the stage as a 3 of in the deck as well. Very interesting, and congrats to Sam for getting 7th place there. Just thought that the Tempest Kick card was a super unique ad. I don't believe I had seen many people running the card, and if so, it was normally a very low count in the deck. So seeing it as a 4 of, kind of like as a substitution to Dock Q if you can't seem to find the card, was very cool and very unique in my opinion. And coming in 6th place was Jacob. Jacob crushing it with the Doflamingo. From 6th place on to 2nd place, we have our X1s here, ladies and gentlemen. So the Jacob here only dropped 1 game, and he has a pretty, I would say, pretty standard list overall of Teach, but I do think just a few interesting ratios that I don't typically see in most lists that I kind of wanted to point out. So we don't really need to go over too much about what Teach does here, or not Teach, excuse me, what Doflamingo does here. A lot of people know what the deck list typically looks like. It's a very standard idea, but running Perona at a 3 of was very interesting to me. I have been seeing this from some decks, is that people have been building with Perona as a 3 of instead of 4, just because Sengoku typically ends up finding the pieces you need and being able to use the Boa Hancock to set up the top of your the top of your deck is also a great option. There's also many ways to bounce back the Perona once it's played. So it's typically like if you're running 3, you're able to utilize one version of that card so many times throughout a game. So and then having Teach at 3 was also very interesting. I've typically been seeing a lot of people running 4 of this card because it's just very, very strong into almost every matchup. It's a really annoying card that if your opponent doesn't have a great way to remove it, it just becomes a huge source of value for you the rest of the game for you. So that was something I wanted to bring up. And then the utilization of Jozu only being at 2 in the deck, I think that 2 is fair. I've seen a bunch of lists running it at 3, and then some not even running it at all, which we will be getting to. One of our top 4 deck lists chose not to run Jozu at all. So congratulations again to Jacob for getting 6th place here. And then going into 5th place, probably the most unique leader in the top 8 in my opinion was Lim, and it was very funny towards the end of the stream. Congratulations again to Larry for getting 5th place. My man Pac-Man, okay, ran Lim, and he was like, oh yeah, I was crushing with Lim, I was 4-1. I was like, you are him with Lim. Okay, so that is the motto behind this deck right now. He is him with Lim. Running a very Straw Hat heavy package here, but obviously a lot of Odyssey cards as well fall into this, from mostly, I think it's OPO 8 or is it 9 that these cards fall? Yeah, OPO 9 that these cards fall from. But there are a few choices that, like the Rosinante here. Oh no, this is an OPO 9 card. I apologize. I thought this was an OPO 8 card. So yeah, the vast majority of these being Odyssey cards, as well as a combination of some Straw Hats and Whitebeard Pirates and, you know, stuff like that. That the Law is a very good searcher in the deck for. I don't believe there's any Heart Pirates type cards in the deck besides Law himself. So this card doesn't essentially whiff because there's so many potential hits. I believe there's 20 Straw Hat hits if I'm not mistaken, and just having, you know, a really good opportunity to find the cards that you need is just fantastic. There's also extremely important, you know, top end cards for this deck, such as Zoro, that are unbelievably important for this deck to function. Zoro is just works perfectly with Lim's effect and everything. And, you know, having Lim being able to search out audio as well as the other Odyssey cards gives this deck a lot of searching power as well. So between Law and Lim, I mean, there's a lot of really awesome ideas here. By the way, again, probably my fault for not, you know, starting with this, but Lim's effect, just being able to, you know, all of your characters when they come into play are rested, but then you can activate main, you can rest 3 of your Dawn, you get to ramp a Dawn as rested, and then play out an Odyssey type card of 5 or less from your hand. So I personally think that Lim has a future in OP10. In OP9, I don't believe it's not the best. I don't think it's a bad deck by any means, but I don't believe that it's maybe as good as it wants to be. So it's getting some of those pieces that it might need in OP10 to really thrive a little bit better. And yeah, I thought this was a really unique list. I just thought it was very fun to see some of these cards that I personally had seen a lot of people either just completely cutting audio from the deck and instead running more of the Doflamingo, and then to see my man Larry here crush it running the 3 of audio, which I think is, like, in my opinion, a no-brainer in the deck. You know, being able to activate 3 cards on play makes this a 6/9 for you know, for playing it out. And then now just with the opponent's attack, you know, once it comes to their turn, you just rest one of your active Dawns that you got back for you know, for free essentially, and you could get plus 2,000 for a battle. So for just the cost of a Dawn, you know, you're saving a 2k in hand. So I really like this card. It's also very tough to remove, you know, with its cost and power level. So I'm very happy to see this 4-1 with Lin. Congratulations to Larry for honestly a fantastic job with the deck. Moving into the top 4, I believe we have a more standard list of Blackbeard here. So since we've looked over the cards, just a couple of unique points to go over. Excuse me, was Jack at 2. Jack being ran in the list is something that I saw towards the beginning of OP09, but then kind of fell off as people were trying to make Whitebeard playable in the meta. So Jack at 2, I personally like. I'm fine. When I was testing this deck, I really enjoyed just having a 1 of this card, because it was kind of a solution, you know, from time to time that I was able to draw into. And if it wasn't a card that I was going to use for, you know, a particular matchup, it's a very easy card to pitch from my hand to use for leader effect. Running 2, though, does make it a little more consistent in the list, so I think that has some merit. But instead of running the Tempest Kick Sky Slicer, we are choosing here at 4th place, by the way, Gabriel, congratulations, to run the Dragon Claw. And I think that this is just the card you have to run, in my opinion, after watching some of the better Blackbeard players, you know, do well in a lot of the events. I've seen Awakened TCG run this card. It's essentially your solution to the very aggressive nature of Doflamingo. So I like this card a lot. I do wish that it had a trigger. Personally, I think that would make me feel a little bit better about running the card. But since it doesn't have a trigger, I still think it's a great counter to have on certain turns to be able to deal with pesky blockers, you know, just really annoying nuisances that happen to be played. I like the card a lot, so running it as a 2 of does make sense to me. Running the more typical 4 of Finger Pistol, 3 of Black Hole here. 2 of the stage is very interesting. I think to me that's a little scary. I think this deck without the stage does get a little scary at some stages of the game. So personally, I like to have it at 3, but I mean, obviously Gabriel doing really well with it here, being able to take 4th place, going X and 1. So congrats to Gabriel as well. And in 3rd place, we had Austin, aka Linus, taking 3rd place with Doflamingo. And this was what I was mentioning before, was, you know, a very typical style of, you know, build with Doflamingo, also mimicking the 3 of Perona rather than the 4. So I do see that to be kind of like a very normal trend now. But instead of maybe running a few cards at lower counts, he decided to kind of go up a little bit on some of the cards that maybe, you know, are ran a little less. So going back to, I believe, Jacob's build, he ran 2 of the Raging Tiger Blades right here to be able to deal with maybe more of the mirror matchup, the purple Luffy matchup, you know, typically decks that can go a little wider, such as Lucci as well. And then 2 of the Perfume Femur. So essentially cut the Jozu from the list, went a little heavier on the event side. I think that Perfume Femur is one of those cards that I don't run Doflamingo enough to fully understand how people get away with running it just a 1 of. But so like I've been trying 2 of when I do play this deck, but man, that card is, having to play around that is tragic sometimes, let me tell you. But yeah, Gabriel running a very standard list here, but also succeeding extremely well with it. And obviously a little more event heavy was able to take him a long way. So love to see it, and congrats to him for the 3rd place finish. And oh, excuse me, Austin. Sorry, Gabriel was 4th place finish. Austin for the 3rd place finish with this Doflamingo build. And now going into the 2nd place deck list, we had Rob Lucci from Lucas, and a player that was able to join into the event from, you know, the link being shared in the chat, playing out of Germany, I believe. Lucas was running the Lucci deck, and it's always fun to, in my opinion, to look at how Lucci's build their decks, because there's like a very standard, I would say like 42 cards that are played in this deck. And then there's like 8 cards of really weird wiggle room. Like, you can just change ratios of certain things. You can add this, take out that, you know, put in this. So it's very interesting to see whether they build for more consistency or for maybe some of those kind of random tech pieces. And I think that personally, after looking at Lucas's list, it looks as though he went for more consistency. And because you can kind of see that with there only really being two one-ofs in the deck, which is the Helmeppo, which I was a little surprised about. I think that Helmeppo is just such an important card that running this as a one-of kind of scares me, because if I don't see it in trash, I'm very much so relying on seeing the Suru. And even then, I'm still losing a little bit of that reduction that Helmeppo might be able to get me to help clear 2 bodies off the board. So, but obviously running one of, he was able to find it well enough, or not be put into a position where he felt as though he had to see the card. You know, a great substitution is that instead, since we're just running the one of Helmeppo, running 2 of the Hina, you know, it gives us that Rebecca Hina Lucci combo. Very, very powerful combo from the OP, what was it, OP06, or I believe it was OP05, OP06 meta, where Sakazuki was, you know, really showcasing how powerful that is. You know, that's still a very, very relevant thing in Rob Lucci. So having Hina there as a 2 of was pretty interesting. I've seen most at like a 1 kind of tech choice to, you know, pull from trash and potentially have that combination with Rebecca occasionally. The Sabo at 2 seems to be very typical. That's what I've been seeing. Jack at 3 as well seems very typical. Running the 1 of 6 King pistol, I personally really like, because you do run quite a lot of bricks in this deck, and being able to, you know, find 1, this is a searchable card through Spandom, but also 2, it now becomes a free 3k counter with 1 of your bricks in hand, you know, with that combination. So I like the 6 King pistol. 4 of Ice Age, 4 of Tempest Kick, very standard and very obvious. But the 3 of Finger Pistol, this was a lot more than I expected. I've seen Lucci start to run this card a bit more. It's searchable. It works really well for their deck. It can actually stop an opponent's tempo just by getting it luckily off of a trigger. So I respect the choice personally of 3. Sometimes that card just off of life can really change the tide of a game completely. And yeah, I just thought it was very interesting, because I feel like I haven't typically seen 3. It's more been a 2 or a 1 of that I've seen in a lot of lists. So it's cool to see that everybody's been, you know, testing a couple of different ratios. So congratulations again to Lucas for 2nd place with Lucci here, only losing 1 game, and that would be to the 1st place player, Justice, aka Jubby TCG, coming in 1st, one of the local homies here from VB, and he takes 1st with Rob Lucci. So we had a Lucci finals, which, by the way, if you didn't get a chance to watch, I would highly recommend going back and watching that in the video that I uploaded of all the matches. This was a phenomenal finals between these 2 players. Typically, you know, a lot of people will say, oh, Lucci versus Lucci, it's just who sees more Moria, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. It was fantastic. It was a really hard fought, well thought out final match between the 2 players. Cannot recommend it enough. So here it looks as though Jubby personally, I think, was going for more tech choices. After looking at his list, we do have a 1 of Kaku, right? Just a random 1 of in the deck. I think it's a great solution to a lot of aggressive, you know, flood the board with 4 costs early on in the game. So and it's also out of that 4 cost range that maybe Doflamingo thrives off of, as well as other decks. You know, just getting to that 5 cost range allows this deck to stay on the board a little more consistently. So the 1 of Kaku, I think, is a very interesting tech choice. We also have 2 of the 9 cost Kaido. It's a great card for not only answering the mirror, but black yellow Luffy, being able to do very well into Teach as well, which is typically not a great matchup. And I was able to talk to Jubby about some of his matchups. He played against 1 Teach, played against 1 BY Luffy, and the Lucci in finals. So this card put in work for him that day and did really, really well. So running a 2 of the Kaido was pretty, in my opinion, pretty surprising. I thought once one had been played in a game that was probably it, and he played a second. I was like, oh man, all right, we're cooking over here. But the 1 of 6 King pistol as well, kind of touching back onto what I was saying with Lucas's list, very nice for getting out of some of those, you know, swings when you just have bricks in hand. So I do like the choice there. And then the 1 of finger pistol. I mean, again, this can just be a momentum swinger based off of trigger alone, but the effect is fantastic in being able to remove, you know, really annoying cards from your opponent's board. I like the idea of finger pistol. It also leaves you with 6 Dawn, which is so much for Lucci to just make so many things happen. 6 Dawn for Lucci is like, yeah, I can do anything. Like, sure, 10's great, but I can still do anything with 6. So finger pistol is a really, really cool 1 of. 6 King pistol 1 of. Kaku as a 1 of. Helmeppo brought up to 2, which I thought kind of made more sense in my opinion. Just being able to see that card consistently is very important. And yeah, that's going to conclude going over the top 8 lists from the tournament. I'm looking forward to putting out more of these as I get these tournaments going. So after every event, I plan on breaking down all of the matches that were streamed on the tournament into one video, so they're very easily digestible and easy to watch through, and then also going over the top decks that each player has. You know, I would love to hear some feedback though, guys, if you do think there is a way to improve how I do these, or, you know, just kind of going over a brief summary of the list rather than a more in-depth idea, I think is something, you know, to maybe think about. But I would love to hear your feedback. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. All right, peace.